I looked to the right, and I seen a boat get hit. And then I realized what we were going into. As I hit the beach, Wally Lawton lowered the ramp, and the soldiers started pouring out. And I seen them dropping. I seen them getting shot. I seen them, their faces blown off. God, it was an awful sight. It's a sight I'll never forget. It's been in my mind since. And this is the first time I ever talked about it. I hope it's my last. As they were going off, there was one soldier there that didn't want to leave. I guess he froze. He seen what happened in front of him, and we were instructed not to take anybody back unless they were wounded or dead. As I lifted up my arm, tell him to get off, I was shot over here, and it came out my back. And as he went over, I don't know whether he got hit or not, I backed the boat out. And I was very, very fortunate. I mean, I missed the obstacles. I landed on a beach, and I can remember the soldiers telling me, go all the way in, I don't want to get wet, I don't want to get wet, you know. They didn't get wet, they got killed.
Our orders at that time as a combat medic, we were not to take care of anybody wounded on the beach. We were supposed to be moving so fast that we couldn't stop to take care of any wounded. It didn't turn out that way. I had over 150 more pink cigarettes on me that morning, and I used every one of them as I was taking care of another soldier. I didn't realize it. I used my last cigarette, morphine cigarette on him. And just about 5 seconds after that, I was hit twice, paralyzed in my left arm and hit my right leg. I didn't have any morphine to give myself.
We were getting soaking wet and the wind was blowing. It was pitch dark. We didn't know where we were going, and I think we got separated somewhere about 300 or 400 yards before we got to the beach. And that's when we started taking mortar and artillery fire. Most of the men started got panicky, and they were jumping off of the back of the boat, and some of them were jumping off the sides. And the first man that exited our boat, he went off the front of the boat, and a surge of the water forced that landing craft on him, and he was hit in the head with that ramp, and he was killed right away. The whole German army, it seemed like, opened up on us. Machine guns were the worst. They crisscrossed the front of the beach. I got my men organized and got across the beach, and I think there was about 3 or 4 of us that actually got across. We got to the seawall. My rifle had gotten clogged up with sand, and I took my raincoat off out of my pack, and I spread it out so I could clean my rifle. My raincoat was full of bullet holes. I did get across with my number 1 2 gunner and number 3 gunner. We lost a machine gun in the water. My number 3 gunner, he hollered over to me, "Are we going to get through all of this?" I didn't know how to answer him. I thought we were all going to die. Seemed like everybody that tried to run across the beach would get shot. We couldn't stay where we were because the incoming tide would swamp us. So I told my squad, I said, I'm going, and I said, follow behind me. I was scared to death, but I got up out of that water and started running as hard as I could run, and I ran and ran and ran. It seemed like forever because we had 400 yards. That's 4 football fields end to end that we had to go across under fire, machine guns, and it was scary as heck. And when we got across, I looked, and there was my number 1, 2, and 3 gunner. They were right with me. Right after that, a hail of machine gun bullets started crisscrossing that beach. So I guess we found them at the right time while they were reloading. And we got to the top of the hill. I looked back over behind us, and I could see that armada, and I had never seen so many ships in all my life. I thought it was like going to the movies. I was scared to death, but it was still exciting.
On the first wave, my job was to drop the ramp. And the machine guns were hitting the ramp in the front of the ramp. But I knew when I dropped the ramp, the machine gun was going to come into the boat. But I had to drop the ramp because the troops had to get out. This is the first wave. So when I dropped the ramp, the Germans had 14 machine guns, MG-42 machine guns, capable of 160 rounds a minute. When I dropped the ramp, all those machine guns opened up. And in the front of my boat, 7, 8, 10, 15 kids, I don't know, they just went down like you're cutting wheat. They told me we made 15 trips with my boat.
British coxswain told us couldn't take us in any further, that he had to drop a ramp. And when he dropped the ramp, the captain was the first man off, and they hit him, and he fell in the water. And my friend Dick Wright was second off, and a medic was third, and I was fourth. When I went off, the boat ran up and kind of threw me sideways. I went off the side of the boat. And I had all that regular gear like everybody, but I had a 35-pound radio with me. So I knew that radio would drown me. And when I got to the bottom, I had not buckled it, and I just peeled it off and left it. And I come up, and the captain was up and hollering, I'm hit, I'm hit. I started towards him, and when he went down, I went over there. He was in water over his head. When I got there, I could see blood boiling up from down underneath. So I said, there's nothing I can do for him. I got to save my own self. I could see other boats coming in, and one of them was close to us. And the ramp went down, and I seen a man come off to the end of it and get hit with a machine gun. His helmet flew off. And I knew then it was Dr. Ware, because he has flaming red hair. And he had brought himself in on the third wave rather than 4 o'clock that afternoon when the beach was clear. It was a wall several hundred feet away, and I was trying to make it to that wall because it was protection. Crawling from one dead body to another, a log, anything, that I could get into protection from. And when I finally got to the wall, I found a buddy of mine named Mac Smith from West Virginia, and he'd been hit in the face. And it looked like his eye was partly hanging out, and I slapped a bandage on his eye. And we started pulling dead out of the water. We pulled a lot of men out of the water. Once in a while, we'd find a live one.
I was a medic. I did not have a weapon. The only thing I had was the white Red Cross on my arm, and I was dressed like the rest of the soldiers. My helmet was just regular helmet like everybody else wore, no Red Crosses on it. That ramp went down, and we knew that as soon as that ramp goes down, you ran out as fast as you could. We were on water up to above my waist, and then all of a sudden it got deep. And we had Navy life preservers on, which we should have been wearing up high. A lot of the fellows did not wear it high because of the weight on their back. They went backwards and they drowned. Quite a number of men drowned. We landed in a place called Dog Red Sector. We got to this seawall. It wasn't that high. It was about maybe 4 feet high where we landed, and we could look up on that hill. And we were there for quite some time, those of us that had gotten that far. And there was a number of fellows that were out on the beach there. And being a medic, I was trying to get as many as and patch up those guys that were hit. The sergeant says, come on, we're going over this seawall. So we climbed up and went over that seawall. We got across that little road, and we were in a ditch over there, and all of a sudden, for some reason, everybody got up and ran, and we ran back and jumped back on the beach again, which we realized then we were, scared. So the sergeant says, hey, we're going back over again. So we went back over again. We got up to the top of that hill. The invasion time was 06:30, and I don't think I got up to that top of that hill until well after 11 o'clock that morning. At this point, we had about half of the platoon. The rest of them had either been drowned, killed, whatever.
They dropped a ramp. I was standing in the front left corner. We had one boat to the left of us that was hit, went on fire. And I remember seeing one of the guys jump overboard on fire himself. Even his shoes were burning. Something went through my right elbow of my arm. That began to bleed a little bit and kind of crushed the bone. Everywhere you looked was dead people. The third wave was coming in about the time that I was getting bleeding bad and getting weaker. That time I got a wound in my left thigh. It was hit out of here 14 inches. You could see the bone. I put a tourniquet on that and gave myself a shot of morphine. One guy was hung up on the barbed wire, and I had to go under twice to get him loose. The Higgins boat came in. The ramp hit me in the back and pushed me to the bottom with the guy that I had. Unless that ramp went up, that we were both going to die there. And that Higgins boat backed out and moved to another position. And I took the guy and I crawled back till I could get that guy back out to the beach. I tried to go back in again, but I couldn't walk, and I was kind of crawling in the water to get to a guy that his arm was off. Every time the waves come in, and he would try to reach it with his good hand to save it from being washed away. So I got to him and pulled him back enough away from the waves that he wouldn't be washed out in the ocean, and gave him a shot of morphine. Told him, I said, look, you're going to be okay. We'll get you out of here. He died in my arms.
We loaded up 36 men. They climbed cargo nets to get in. We started for a V formation towards the shore. We hadn't gone very far. We got hit by 88, I think. The four of us Navy fellows was in behind like a partition by the engine. And when we get hit, it took the bow off, so the boat went down anyway. When we got back to the surface, four Navy fellows, that's all that was there. Army fellows had a lot of gun, ammunition, grenades. They had a lot of weight on. And the ones that didn't get killed was in the water, and of course they went down. And they had so much weight they didn't get a chance to get it off, so they just didn't come up. But we swam back to the nearest troop transport. We were still a long ways from shore. But we climbed the cargo net. We got up on deck. They asked us what we were doing. We told him. He says, well, come with me. I got a boat. The crew's been hurt. You take their boat. So we did. And that time, we went to shore, and we did make it. But when we did hit the beach, I lowered the ramp. Then it just seemed like every gun was on our boat. And the coxswain says, if we're going to get out of this, we're going to get the hell out of this boat. Well, there's many men laying on the ramp. We couldn't get up over the ramp, so we jumped over the side. I've forgotten from there until late that afternoon up on the beach. What wounds the four of us Navy fellows had were superficial. We stayed on the beach that night. I didn't know where my crew was even. But next morning I went down onto the beach. The fighting was all inland then, over the beach, and I found the beach master and hunted around. I found my crew. They had come through it all right. They didn't get hurt.
Once he let the landing craft ramp down, many of the men that were standing in the front were killed immediately. I landed in water up to my chest. For the infantrymen that were loaded down with ammunition, mortars, very heavy equipment, and many of them sank down to the bottom and drowned. I was able to finally touch bottom with my feet. I made it to the beach. I made it up to the
defilade, I started treating wounded men. And I happened to glance back out to the beaches, and I saw that many wounded men were laying on the beach, and the tide was coming in very fast. And I knew that these men were destined to drown. I dropped what I was doing, and I went back to the water. I was successful with many of the men. I was able to drag them up to the high water line. I did not bother to treat them. I left them lay there, and I went back to assist the next man. And I did this until I became entirely exhausted. And I returned to the defilade and laid down to rest, try to recover some of my strength. I came across a fellow medic that I knew that had been seriously wounded. He had been hit in the stomach. I knew that he was dying. So I gave him a shot of morphine and I tried to bandage his wound. So I tried to console him. Then he eventually died in my arms. And I finally moved inland. I could not go any further because I was completely exhausted. I found a place and I finally laid down and fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I found that I was surrounded by dead Germans and dead Americans that I had not seen when I laid down.
Each soldier on each side of me got hit in the chest. They died immediately. I got hit in the rifle. So I hit the ground. I looked up. I never cursed. I looked up at the pillbox 73 on my right, who was shooting up the sand all around me, and I cursed. And as I looked in that direction, an 88 millimeter shell went off in front of me, took this cheek off, took this jaw off, took the roof of my mouth off, hole in the roof of the mouth. That was my welcome to Dog Green Sector. And after that, I got off the beach. But first, I saw my sergeant from my boat, Clarence Robertson, get cut in half while he was praying with his rosary beads. When I got off the beach, I met one of my Company A people, Dominic Suro, who ran down the beach. I followed him with a new rifle. Meanwhile, my rifle fired once. I killed the machine gunner that cut my buddy in half. I used armor-piercing ammunition, so I blew his head off.
The coxswain, I guess we'll call him, started to tell us what he was going to do, and I was watching where these tracers or the machine gun fire was coming, and I said, I'm not going through the front. I'm going to go over the side of it because this is such a serious situation. You guys do what you want to do. I'm going over the side. Frankly, I'm not sure how many, but a bunch of my guys went over the right side with me. And unfortunately, we landed in a hole that had been bombed mistakenly, where a bomb was dropped there, whether they was getting rid of it or what. And we were in about, oh my, a good 8 or 9 feet of water. And with this packed, extra heavy pack, by the way, with everything we had on it, we went down and it was trouble getting up to get a breath. Normally, your field pack weighs 65 pounds. But that day, with the extra ammunition and everything, the extra that you carried on your person and in the sack and around the sack, it was probably an 80-pound sack. But once we get in the water and the water hit it, it's got to be 100 pounds. So, of course, as fast as we could unhook it, we're shedding packs in the water, up on the edge of the beach. Our equipment was going in, and we didn't care except the rifle. You kept your rifle. We didn't fire a shot. We got in at 6:30 in the morning. We were totally nothing more than target practice for the Germans. I never fired a shot, nor anybody in my platoon fired a shot. We finally got into the hedgerow about 7 o'clock at night, and finally we were in combat. We saw the enemy face to face. We saw that we had opportunities. We found it necessary to start shooting.
So the guy says, let's dig in, sir. Says, like hell, we got to get up off there. Just you dig your grave here. We got to get up to find the enemy. That's the only way we'll survive.
Everybody's trying to do something. You know, it's so bad. Trying to help the wounded. And my medic section trying to find the wounded and all that. I never got scared at the time. It's when you stop for a couple of hours and start thinking what could have happened, that's when you get scared.
We were just bouncing against the boat, everything, just bouncing. And I was looking out that slat in that door, and I thought, oh my God, what are we getting into here? They took a direct hit. I'm sure not one got off that barge. It just blew them all to pieces. And the bodies were just floating all over and continuous. It just kept getting worse. The water was just full of people. It was full of soldiers and sailors. You know, their landing barges were exploded. You knew what they were shooting at you long before the door went down. I had all the blood plasma, I think, for the 3rd Battalion on my back when I landed. And that was used up almost in just a few hours.
Then when we went across on D-Day, they had those ducks, see? And we got across, and I told the kids, be quiet, don't worry, you'll be okay. You just got to get used to it. And when we landed, where we landed on Omaha Beach, they had that big wire across. When they laid down that front of that barge on top of that metal there, why then it was hard to get through. And the kids had their duffel bags and everything. I said, you just leave them. You don't need that. And they always got off and tried to get off. But so many of them got scared and they were crying, and they were, instead of listening to the other fella and they started jumping off over into the water and didn't realize that that water is deep, you know? And they were drowning. There was only 3 of us that got through. Out of that whole barge, there's only about 40 guys, 35, 40 guys in that barge. And they didn't make it. There was just bodies laying all over.
And I got to thinking, well, boy, this is it. Next time we get on dry land, they're going to be shooting at me. So I better be sound. I better be awake, good and awake. So I don't want to get sick. I took seasick pills. We only supposed to take 1 or 2, I guess, but I took the bottle. I took part of a small handful, swallowed them down. After a while, we got in our landing craft and I started getting sleepy. I never was so scared in all my life. I couldn't wake up. And we were going, and I knew that when that ramp went down, they were going to be shooting at me, and I couldn't wake up. So I got right up in the front of the landing craft, and that ramp there in front, the water came right up over that ramp, hit me right in the face. Well, we started out about 4 o'clock. It was 7 o'clock. We were almost 3 hours going in, and that water kept hitting me in the face. And finally, it all wore off, and I was all right. I think I was the most scared then any time all during the war.
Coming in, I never seen so many American planes in the sky. There were hundreds of them. And the fellow that was in the hole with me, he kind of stuck his head up to see what was going on, and a shell blew right alongside the hole and knocked his head right off his shoulder. So I was in there all night long with that fellow with all that blood all over the place. I know there was guys screaming and hollering and yelling, you know, and they wounded, couldn't get any help.
They were holding their machine gun fire until you stepped off. And then they just picked you off. It was like losing a brother when you see him falling. We went out into the water. It come up to my chin at first because there was a lot of waves, a lot of wind. It was cold. Everywhere I looked, there were bodies laying around. I thought, well, the next one will be me. The captain shoved me down under some kind of steel bar, and he says, don't move, stay still. And we stayed there for, I'd say, 45 minutes. There was a lot of machine gun fire and some artillery fire coming in, and they were ricocheting off of the steel all over me. And I thought, Lord, we will never make it. I saw a parachute over to the left of where we had come to the bank, and I saw a movement, and I thought it was a German, and I took my rifle off my shoulder, and I lifted the parachute off of this fella, and he said, oh, I'm so happy to see American. He said, I'm hurt,
He said, "Do not go out from this wall, you will get killed." He was landing and he hit the side of the wall, and he said he fell and his arm was hurt. And he said, "I played dead, so the Germans didn't know I was down there."
I was holding my rifle out of the water at the time, and the water was over my waist yet still at that time. And then once I got hit, that knocked me over backwards, and I floundered. I thought my arm was going to fall off, that it was was hardly there. The blood was pouring out of there, that it looked like it wouldn't be long I'd have no more blood. The good part was that the wave was still throwing me forward towards shore, so that I was going to the shore. As I was floundering around, one of the fellows came to me and he gave me a hand. Normally your orders are to go to the beach, don't stop to be playing around with other things, so I never expected help at all because they had to go, but he did stop, and actually he took the tourniquets or whatever they were from me and himself and that there, and he tied my arm to my side and wrapped it some. And the big thing he did was he found my morphine and gave me a shot of morphine. That took care of the shock end of it. You get the morphine and then you're just, you almost feel you don't care about anything.
The tail end dropped down and let us into the water. There was at least 2 machine guns setting up way up high. They were firing at us. We found out on some of the boats behind us, they got hit. I started thinking then, when am I? Am I next? One of my buddies got hit. That tore me up. I didn't think I could make it. I wanted to go help him and do the best I could for him, but it wasn't my job.
But they said we was in the second wave, is what they told me. I was scared to death. Anybody tell me he wasn't scared, and that's stupid. They're lying. That water was red as blood, and the guys was hollering to help me. I'm married. I got kids. And the landing, I know we lost maybe 20 guys out of our company. Of course, there was a bombing and strafing, and you're just lucky you got on land.
And we got off on the beach, and of course, the thing that disturbed me the most was there were so many American soldiers in the water drowned. You see what happened, the Germans had put in piling and wired it all along in different areas out into deep water. And the infantry got off in water up to their chest and walked into these barbed wire, got tangled up, couldn't get their packs off, and they drowned. So there was a number of them in the water.
Hit the beach on D-Day in the second wave of LCTs. I carried on board ship 5 tanks and 55 men from the 1st Army. There was this Omaha, what they called Easy Red, but which later they called Bloody Red. There were 5 sectors on Omaha, and this was the worst one. I was one of the fortunate few. The timing was just right so that I could get all the way up and onto the beach. So 3 tanks left, and about half of the 55 men left. And then the commander of the beach came aboard ship and says, "Stop, just don't bring any more tanks ashore. We're not moving, we're bogged down, we're in trouble. Instead, get the ramp down all the way and bring aboard all the wounded that we can gather." And then I went in for the second time and unloaded the last 2 tanks and the last 25 or 30 men.
When we got about 500 yards from the beach, the beach masters, that's the men that controlled what was coming on off the beach, radioed and told them not to dump any more soldiers there, to take us about 2,000 yards down to our left and land behind where the 1st Division went in. Just before it was time for us to go, the lieutenant was standing there at the door, and he says, "I'm going to see what's going on out there." And he cracked the door, and when he did, a burst of machine gun fire went right across the top of it. He slammed that door shut. Great big balls of perspiration rolled out on him, and he looked at it. He says, "Men, the next time I open that door," said, "we got to go."
I stopped for a cigarette behind that berm, and my matches were wet. So I turned to my left, and not 3 feet from me, there was a soldier. And I says, "Buddy, have you got a match?" And he didn't answer. I looked again, and there was no head under the helmet. The soul of that boy inspired me to up at that instant and run for the cliff.
We were supposed to go 1.5 miles inland before we met any opposition. My job was to establish a supply depot. I was in about the 6th wave, I think. I was told that the first 4 waves of the 1st Infantry Division was all wiped out. When he dropped the lid down, the door down in front of our LCT, me and Major Eccles jumped right off into the water. And it's only about 5 or 6 other soldiers got off of that boat. When that boat blew out of the water, the boat blew completely out of the water, and all I seen was kids, their arms are flying and bodies flying all over. When it comes to praying, I'm not that religious, but I tell you, I never prayed so hard in my life all that day.
Guys were trying to hide behind these little 3 strips, like railroad track, and we were trying to help the demolition teams to blow these things up and get them out. Our biggest job was trying to keep the GIs away from them, even when we put a pack on them to blow it up. As soon as we'd walk away, some GIs coming in would get behind it. We were in one spot where there were about 17 of us. So stretcher bearers were walking across in front of us, carrying a guy, trying to get him evacuated. The shell landed very close. It wounded the fellow that was on the stretcher, and it hit some of the other fellows too. They came back with another series of shots. The shell hit just to the right of us, and I got hit with shrapnel in the back. Everybody in our group was either killed or wounded, and I'm watching shrapnel, literally shrapnel going through his body from his back, coming out his chest, and he's screaming. And that same shrapnel went right across the wounded GI and hit Frank Walden, all of his left arm, shoulder, face, and head, right down into his leg. Charlie and I had been awake for hours and hours and hours, and by the time it was dark, with the major small arms fire was gone. Charlie and I found one of these trenches, got down in the trench and pulled the ponchos, pulled those over us and kind of covered us. Within minutes we were sound asleep. Woke up, pulled the ponchos back and stick our heads up, and all we can see are Germans. Pull the ponchos back and we're right in the middle of a whole German army, it looked like. Do we give up? We're literally debating whether we want to try to start a firefight with only 2 of us. And then we poked our heads up again, and what we saw, same Germans, but they didn't have guns. A minute or so, we suddenly realized that they're all prisoners.
Well, let's see, I landed on Omaha Beach at 6:32 a.m. There was 13 of us, and we were all 19 years old. On exit 1, it had I think it's 12 highline poles, cemented where trucks or tanks couldn't go up it. So anyway, our job was to blow those 12 or 13 poles up on exit 1 or get 3 or 4 out of the 13 that got killed, and the rest of us, just about all of us go. We did blow the poles down, and I was what they call a rain man. I took a spool of primer cord and I run around that whole bunch and came back to where I started and laid that primer cord down. And each one of them other guys had a package of explosive, and each one of them had a post to put their explosive on. Yeah, we were under a lot of fire the whole time we were there. Of course, we was up close to where the Fed station was going, where we did this at, and they were mostly shooting at people that was landing on the beach down below us. 18 or 19 landing craft full of riflemen that had landed in the first wave, and then our boat came in behind them. Then behind us, at 6:33, there was 17 boats of demolition people to blow those obstacles up. That was on the beach, and got pretty crowded down close to the water's edge. Most of them were dead, died. I shot in the leg, and I've still got it in my leg. But after I got wounded, they got me off the beach pretty quick after 771 in that battalion. As of today, there's three of us left.
And we went in second, there was bodies all over, everywhere. In fact, there was bodies floating in the water. But the reason we had to get off is because they was bringing a lot of infantry back on our boat. And they got so many infantry on there that we pretty much had to get off. Because they was bringing all the wounded back that was just wounded onto our ships. And in fact, when we got onto the beach, we crawled. He never stood up. You know, when he come back, he got up in a turret and I got out, and I didn't get 20 feet from the gun, and he just got blew all to heck. A bullet must have come right between the armor and where the guns come out. Just hit him right in here and just, they buried the guys with bulldozers. Dug a big trench and then pushed them in.
We did land in the afternoon rather than in the morning. It was a lot easier for us to survive.
All the dead people around the beach was littered. They said, for God's sake, soldiers, if you're going to die, die inland. Don't die here on the beach.
And on the second wave, shrapnel bullets hitting the water and boats being hit, and guys screaming. And all you could see was the firing, you know, explosion from the heavy artillery and machine guns firing from the pillboxes. And of course, once we hit the beach, we laid down, made ourselves little silhouettes, and firing at the pillboxes. The water was actually had a pinkish color to it from being hit, guys being wounded, and even bodies floating. You had instructions not just to keep going. Don't mess around trying to help somebody. That's, I mean, a lot of them drowned, right? I mean, you know, they couldn't, after getting wounded, they couldn't swim. I was given instructions to run up to the pillboxes, and I'd throw hand grenades into the pillbox. It was unbelievable the amount of heavy artillery that was coming in. But anyway, I got hit with that shrapnel, and I felt numbness in my left leg. And I pulled my pant leg up, and the blood was running down, so the medic came over and pulled the shrapnel out, bandaged it up, and kept going forward.
The commanding officer, lieutenant, he was killed going off the ramp when we went in. The machine gunners got him. And I was in the back because I was platoon sergeant. And all of a sudden I realized that I was the one that was running outfit then, because commanders were all gone. Strung all along the beach, was part of the First Army, and about 2,000 men were killed.
And you get in as far as you can, but you don't stop running. So that's what we did. And luckily, I mean, we took over our area of the beach before nightfall. Anybody tells you they was not scared to death is lying to you.
We were slated to land on Omaha Dog Red, but the beachmaster just waved us off and said, no, you can't go in there. There's just too much destruction and too much in the water, and nobody's getting off the beach. Well, they took a tremendous number of casualties. Almost 60% of the first two waves were killed or wounded or captured. We could see the bodies on the beach all right. When they saw us turn toward the beach, and they know we're coming. Then I saw machine gun fire. You could look like rain out in front of the boat, and I didn't really think much of it until it hit the ramp in front of me. Then I thought something of it. And they put her so far up on the beach that I got off in water that was just up to my waist. My job as platoon leader of the Pioneer and Ammunition Platoon was to get through St. Laurent-sur-Mer, go to an orchard on the other side, and make sure there weren't any mines there. And I saw friends of mine badly wounded, and out of maybe 120 or 130 officers, 2 of us were there at the end.
We never had one tank, not one tank, D-Day in our sector. We were outgunned. We were targets. They had cover. We were exposed.
When we hit the beach, the ramp men would flip the cog and down would come the ramp in the front, and the troops would then pour off. We made, I believe it was 2 runs into the beach. The first one, everything went fine. I think we lost about 3 men on that one, on the first run. And the beachmaster told us to hold tight where we were, and then they started bringing wounded aboard.
Our unit schedule was we'd leave our ship at H hour plus 2 hours, but we didn't leave until about H hour plus 8. I was in the Jeep with the driver, and we would go to the beach, and we had on a map where we'd establish our what they called the report center. From that point on with the radio, we controlled the incoming anti-aircraft weapons. The driver and I and the Jeep drove down into the water, and we were submerged. So we went down, hit the bottom, which was maybe, water was hovering maybe 2 feet, 3 feet deep or something, and drove into the beach, and God, all hell broke loose everywhere. You could see it, ships blowing up. First thing we did when we got there, seeing what the problem was, we dug a couple of foxholes in the sand on the beach. And we stayed there that first night on the beach, and the terrifying thing about that was the German bomber. You could look down the beach, and you could see him coming at night, dropping his bomb. Boom, boom, boom. Right along where we were. It scared the living daylights out of you, of course. The first day, one of the most comforting sights of all was to see the sky almost black with lightning P-38s coming across from England.
I had a D7 Caterpillar bulldozer is what I was operating. The Higgins boat, they would drop down. Well, maybe they put them in reverse. They couldn't get back out. We'd go out there and shove them back out in the water so they could get back out. Now that's what I hit, was one of those teller mines. I guess it was about 14 pounds of TNT that set on. It got knocked off and was laying in the beach, and I run over with the tractor, and of course I blew the tractor up and blew myself up with it. I got hit in my eye and side of my face. I helped dig the first cemetery on Omaha Beach with the tractor. They wanted to clean up all the soldiers that was on the beach. They had to be all cleaned up for the next day, for the troops that coming in, and they buried them right on the beach. And there's a marker there that the first cemetery on Normandy Beach, it's still marked to this day. It's there.